Coffee was a relatively obscure beverage in the United States some decades ago. In fact, many Americans had no idea what coffee was, and some assumed it came in a can. Yet, a little business from Seattle, known as Starbucks, managed to shift this attitude and eventually become the world's largest coffeehouse chain. Although Starbucks was started by three friends, it was not simply through their efforts that the firm grew to be worth $100 billion. This accomplishment is attributed to an outsider. A poor Brooklyn high school graduate who went on to become a teacher. Starbucks was founded in 1962 under his direction. Gordon Boker was the man behind this change. He was a University of San Francisco student traveling around Europe in the 1960s when he ordered a cappuccino at a cafe in Rome. He was instantly taken away by the coffee's flavor. It was unique, fantastic, and unforgettable. Most Americans drank instant coffee at home or overcooked coffee at diners at the time. Boker dropped out of the University of San Francisco and returned to his birthplace of Seattle to satisfy his newfound coffee addiction. He would frequently drive from Seattle to Vancouver, British Columbia, to visit Murchie's, a business that sold and roasted coffee beans. This enthusiasm for coffee eventually led him to become one of Starbucks' founders, and his vision and commitment helped develop the company into the coffee behemoth that it is today. Gordon Boker's plan to create a coffee shop was not ordinary. It was revolutionary. Coffee was not popular in America decades ago, and most people were unaware of its existence. Many Americans were unfamiliar with the notion of roasting coffee beans to perfection and brewing them into a great cup of coffee. As a result, when Gordon presented his concept to Jerry Baldwin and Steve Siegel, they felt they were on to something significant. The trio's visit to Peet's Coffee in Berkeley proved to be a game changer. They had never seen Alfred Peet's roasting procedure before, and the way he brought out the full taste of the beans was mind-blowing. Alfred showed the trio how to roast coffee beans in the European style, which demanded a greater level of attention to detail and precision. This method of roasting coffee beans served as the foundation for Starbucks. Meanwhile, Howard Schultz's life changed course. He had always been a driven individual who understood what he wanted out of life. He didn't want to be a great salesperson. He wanted to be a part of something bigger. His search for something more rewarding led him to Hammerplast, where he rose through the ranks to become vice president and general manager. His $75,000 salary, business vehicle, and expense accounts with free travel were insufficient to feed his thirst for more. Howard Schultz saw a tiny shop outlet putting extremely big orders for a drip coffee maker in 1981. Starbucks, with only 4 locations at the time, owned the region. Despite having only a few outlets, Starbucks was purchasing more merchandise than Macy's, one of the world's largest department stores. Howard was intrigued by this and decided to travel to Seattle to check what was going on at the original Starbucks location in Pike Place Market. The shop mostly sold coffee beans, but occasionally provided samples. Howard sampled a sample and was immediately intrigued. He felt as if he had found an entirely new world. Howard couldn't stop thinking about Starbucks on his flight back to New York. He characterized it as a brilliant treasure and contacted Jerry Baldwin, one of Starbucks' founders, to see if there was any way he might fit into the firm. Although Jerry liked the concept, his partners were concerned about bringing in a high-powered New Yorker. Howard himself couldn't believe he was thinking about it. His mother would tell him, "You're doing well, and you have a bright future ahead of you. Don't give it up for a little business that no one has ever heard of." This is how it went down. Jerry and Gordon invited Howard to San Francisco 1 year after his first visit to Starbucks to meet their silent partner, Steve Donovan. Howard expected to go back to New York with an offer in hand, but to his surprise, Jerry's partner was not interested in recruiting him because he thought it was too risky. But Howard was not willing to accept no for an answer, so he approached Jerry and persuaded him that Starbucks' fate was at risk. Jerry contacted him the next day to tell him he got the job and asked when he could come to Seattle. It was at this moment that fate connected Howard Schultz with Starbucks. He decided he wanted to be a part of this groundbreaking coffee shop concept, so he joined Starbucks as director of marketing. Howard thought that no major success occurs by chance, according to his memoir. He had been working at Starbucks for a year when he was sent to Milan for an international housewares exhibition in 1983. He noticed several espresso cafes on his way to the concert and was charmed by the ritual and romanticism of coffee culture. He saw the technique of brewing espresso and how coffee shops operated as social hubs, and this encounter created a new notion in his head. He observed that, while Starbucks offered excellent coffee beans, it did not provide coffee by the cup. They handled coffee as if it were a fruit to be packaged and delivered home with groceries. Starbucks, according to Howard, was lacking the heart and spirit of what coffee has meant throughout the years. He thought Starbucks should provide coffee by the cup, similar to the espresso shops he observed in Milan. Howard's dissatisfaction with Starbucks' stagnant pace of change had been developing for some time. He had a vision for the firm that he believed was being hampered by Jerry's caution. Jerry had been reluctant when he originally pitched the concept of providing espresso beverages in Starbucks locations. Howard had persuaded him to give it a go after nearly a year of persuading. Even then, Jerry had only consented to try the idea at one location, and Howard had been dissatisfied by the team's lack of excitement. Despite the popularity of the initial espresso bar, Jerry was hesitant to extend the concept. The debt from the acquisition of Pete's had put the firm in a predicament, and he was hesitant to take on any more risks. Howard was divided between his devotion to Starbucks and his love of Italian espresso shops. He knew the firm could accomplish so much more, but he was irritated by the opposition he met at every step. During this time, Howard met Scott Greenberg, a lawyer who shared his entrepreneurial spirit. They played basketball together at a downtown athletic club, and afterward, over drinks, Howard shared his issues with Starbucks. Scott was fascinated by Howard's ideas and believed that investors would be interested in supporting him if he chose to go it alone. Howard was uneasy at first. He worked successfully at Starbucks and was well liked in the business. Yet, the more he considered it, the more he understood that this may be his chance. He could regret it for the rest of his life if he didn't take the chance now. With Scott's support, Howard began to consider launching his own coffee company, one centered on the high-quality espresso beverages he had fallen in love with in Italy. It was a frightening thought for Howard. He needed to support his wife and 2 small children, and he understood that launching a new business would be a serious risk. But he also understood that he couldn't stay at Starbucks forever, and that if he wanted to leave an important mark in the world of coffee, he needed to chase his passion. He began to put up a strategy for his new firm, one that would permanently transform the face of the coffee industry, with Scott's assistance. Howard ultimately left Starbucks in 1985 to follow his own goal of launching a new coffee company called Il Giornale, which translates to the newspaper in Italian. Howard had intended to acquire funds from investors to launch his new firm, but Jerry shocked him by agreeing to contribute $150,000 of Starbucks funds. Howard thought that with Jerry and Gordon's help, he could easily secure all of the financings he needed in 6 months. Howard and Gordon traveled to Italy to do research and speak with suppliers to obtain a better understanding of the coffee business and Italian coffee bars. Howard went to Seattle with the intention of raising $1 million in investment, but his plans did not proceed as planned. La Marzocco, a well-known Italian coffee machine manufacturer, declined his idea. Several of the investors he approached regarded high-tech investments as a more profitable and compelling possibility and told him flatly that he was pitching a foolish concept. The concept of Americans spending $1.50 for a cup of coffee was regarded as crazy, and investors thought Howard's decision to quit Starbucks was premature. Howard did not give up despite several rejections. He worked extremely hard and was successful in obtaining the necessary seed funds required to get leased and begin construction on the first store. He spent every minute of his day asking for money and rushing from one meeting to the next. Howard's ambition was to recreate a commodity, and he considered Nike as the only firm that had done so. Nike's aim was to build world-class running shoes and then surround them with an aura of top-tier athletic excellence and amusing playfulness. But Howard's notion of establishing a new coffee culture was met with severe opposition from investors. He contacted 242 persons 217 of whom rejected his suggestion. That was a humiliating event, but Howard refused to give up. He believed in his idea and persisted until he was able to get the financing required to make his dream a reality. At first, the coffee shop made several faults in its attempt to imitate a genuine Italian coffee shop, such as playing just Italian opera, having baristas wear white shirts and bow ties, and not having a sitting space. They immediately recognized, however, that this strategy was not appropriate for Seattle and began making modifications, such as adding seats, changing the music, and giving takeout cups. Despite initial difficulties, sales exceeded expectations. Howard suffered lots of challenges in the beginning, but he persisted and was able to gain a major investment from three of Seattle's most famous leaders, Jack Benaroya, Herman Sikowski, and Sam Strong, who committed $750,000 as a group in 1987. Howard's fortunes improved when Jerry and Gordon agreed to sell Starbucks, for which he needed to raise $3.8 million. His investors were thrilled with the rapid growth of Il Giornale, and he was hopeful that some of them would contribute additional money. Nevertheless, his hopes were nearly dashed when one of his investors, a Seattle business tycoon, attempted to acquire Starbucks and reduced Howard to a small stakeholder. Howard and his colleague Scott devised a strategy and scheduled a meeting with the investor, who was joined by Microsoft founder Bill Gates. Howard was told by the investor that if he didn't take the deal, he'd never work in Seattle again and would be dog meat. Yet, Howard's honesty and equity won, and he was able to persuade all of his investors to have an opportunity to participate in Starbucks, making it fair to all. In the end, Howard was able to raise the $3.8 million he required, and the modern Starbucks was founded on August 18, 1987. Howard's experience exemplifies how perseverance, honesty, and a desire to adhere to your ideals can help you overcome misfortune. It is critical to maintain your beliefs, to be brave, but also to be fair, and to resist pressure. Howard Schultz's vision and ambition boosted Starbucks' growth and expansion to become the world's largest coffeehouse business. Starbucks grew to be a $100 billion corporation with thousands of outlets in over 80 countries under his guidance. It's incredible to think that a simple concept, sparked by Gordon Boker's passion for coffee, has developed into a worldwide phenomenon that has transformed the way the world consumes coffee. If you liked this video, hit the like button. And if you like watching such videos in general, hit the subscribe button. See you next time.